Welcome everyone to another week of ADEX Pixel Virtual Expo. We are in a treat today as we have a great session for this Thursday. For our very first session, which is for this particular one, we have here none other, another great session, which is In Conversation with Strikey. And today we have here Jayne Jenkins, where we're going to be talking about Snapshot and Scholars. Just a little bit introduction on Strikey. He is, of course, ADEX ambassador for Technical Diving Pioneer. But aside from that, I think everybody would have known who David is or Strikey. And well, I'll leave it to you guys to actually just, tell us more about David on the, what do you call these postings that you have questions later on during the sessions. But please allow me to introduce Jayne Jenkins. Jayne is actually the Vice President of Australasian Operations, our World Underwater Scholarship Society, or for short known as OWUSS, or OWUSS. Jayne is also a key member of numerous scientific film and television expeditions aimed at documenting some of the world's most remote and often inhospitable destinations. Jayne is, like what I've mentioned earlier, she's also the VP of the OWUSS in Australasia, and which is also a scholarship sponsored by Rolex for young underwater scientists and enthusiasts. One of the 3 Australian females inducted into the Women Divers Hall of Fame, a fellow international of the Explorers Club of the New York, who in this year was chosen to be one of the 10 Ocean Decades champions for the United Nations. Well, what can we say? It is an exciting session today, and I shall not waste anybody's time. Let's not wait any further. David, over to you. Please introduce us to this beautiful and fabulous lady.
Nora, thank you. And thank you for the lovely introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest this evening is Jayne Jenkins. Jayne is a near neighbour of mine, and we usually catch up for breakfast. So this is rather unusual to be meeting and chatting in the evening. Normally this would take place at ADEX itself in Singapore over a drink or two. Jayne is a person who has a very varied background. Growing up in the UK, post-war Britain, food was rationed, and this is by way of being a very lengthy introduction to Jayne. Food was rationed, and one of our regular meals was cheese on toast, toasted cheese, known as Welsh rarebit. And the reason for mentioning this is that when Jayne came to Australia, she came from Wales and was a surfer. And there was an article published in the Manly Daily, was there not, Jayne, calling you a Welsh rarebit?
Well, yes, I like to think I'm a rarebit.
So you were actually a surfer?
Well, not a very good one, but Wales has got some of the best surf beaches, well, in the United Kingdom, but, it's very well known worldwide. And surfing there was on my doorstep. So I was trying very hard to learn to surf. And when the opportunity came to come to Australia, whoa, what better place to come than Australia to go surfing? And I had lots of friends living in Manly that were surfers. So off I came, trotting away. I bought myself a surfboard and I went in the water here and I was abused. They just, in 1973, they just did not want female surfers in the water here. So it was quite a big turnaround to what it was like in Wales, where they were trying to help you and, get you in the water to surf. But nah, it was a men's sport here. I should say.
And that's changed dramatically now, of course.
It has, yeah. But in Wales, I'd learned to dive in Wales in a place called Aberavon. And diving was very hard for females then. It was the BSAC organisation, and I think I carried tanks for the first 3 months of diving. And then when I got to Australia, there was all these signs, come diving, and I was actually working part-time. I was a BP Bowser pumping petrol, and this truck came in the driveway with frog dive written on it. And there was a guy driving it, Greg from Ringworld in Manly, and we just started talking about diving. Oh, come along, come and see us. And that's when diving took over surfing, and well, it goes on from there, really.
You had quite a varied career when you first arrived in Australia, didn't you?
My first job in Australia was on the buses. I didn't
really
know what to do.
Sounds like a comedy show, doesn't
it? I was Palm Beach to Sydney, and I think everybody got a 20-cent fare because I didn't know which end was which. And I was at the Opera House for the opening. I was a barmaid at the Opera House. I had the pleasure of being in the green room and being introduced to Rolf Harris. We'll say no more there.
So really?
Quite a varied introduction to Australia.
Yeah.
But then I went up to Heron Island from the Opera House up to Heron Island, and not knowing much about Heron Island in those days, but I went there as a barmaid because the guy that used to be the bar manager in a pub called the Carver Bowl in Manly in those days moved to Heron and ran the bar there. So he called all his friends to see if we wanted to go up as barmaids, and that's where I first saw Ron and Valerie Taylor.
You best explain. Heron Island is, of course, on the part of the Great Barrier Reef.
It's on the lower part of the Barrier Reef, one of the lower reef islands out in the Capricorn Bunker Group.
Right.
And it was unique in its day, and well, it's still pretty unique. A little coral atoll, and yeah. So it was my first introduction to the Barrier Reef.
So you did a lot of diving there?
No, they wouldn't let me.
Oh, really?
But it was a lot of snorkeling in the lagoon there.
Yeah.
But did more diving probably over the years. I've done more diving in Sydney than anywhere else.
Really? So, sorry, just back to Heron Island. That's where you first met Ron and Valerie.
Yeah, it was a very brief introduction when they were in the bar. You know, they'd come off the helicopter and there was this couple that would come in there. And they used to come up there quite often. The only diving, I can't remember the guy's name, but it used to be the garbage run. And there was a guy that lived on the island, and he'd take all the plastic bags, the big black plastic bags, out to do the garbage run. And he used to let me go with him. And the bags were full of all the island leftover food, all the bits. So we'd drive out, and you'd be quite a long way from the island, and he'd dump all these plastic bags in the ocean, which is horrible for when you think of it now. But there'd always be the sharks come around. So it was great to go out with them because you'd see the sharks. They were first in. They knew the sound of the motor, I think, and knew the garbage bags were coming out. So I don't think they do that anymore.
Sorry, when you mentioned sharks, of course, this is a little later in your career. You spend a lot of time sort of photographing sharks, but when did you take up photography?
I did photography at a very, very mild intro at school. Well, at school in those days, when I was at school, there wasn't much to choose from, but I was really interested in photography, and I had a camera to come to Australia. And when I got here, I did a photography course, a topside photography course.
Right.
So it sort of from 1973, but then going underwater with a camera would have been, it was one of the original Nikonoses. So it would have been 1980, probably. I took a camera underwater first time. And from then on.
So you've moved from film and seeing the revolution into digital photography and all the benefits that has.
It does, but it's sometimes, I don't know, film, when I look back on old slides,
Yeah.
the quality was fantastic. If you got the shot, the quality was fantastic. You never knew if you were going to get the shot or not. You know, you'd go out, you'd pray, and you'd come home and you'd be busting to see those images. And I used to roll my own films so that I had 37 or 38 images, not 36. And
Right.
you're just praying that you'd got it right. But I think with the old Nikon 3, if you had a 15mm lens, you used f8 to 60th, and it was Aquasy, I think a guy called John Aquasy strobes, and 3 feet away, you knew you'd probably get something. So yeah, it was funny. But I took an old film camera out diving about 2 years ago, and disastrous because I kept forgetting to wind it on. You just press a button and you think, you just, oh my God, what's wrong with it? And you just forget.
Yeah, you've been spoiled by digital.
And you can't see what you've taken.
Yeah.
You know, oh, where is it?
So after Heron Island, you also spent time on tall ships sailing.
I did. That was a bit later in my life. I was at Frog Dive for quite a long time, and some of us do it, some of us don't. I married my instructor, and he had Frog Dive. So that was a part of my life that was quite a while ago. But when I left Frog Dive, it was quite difficult actually, because everybody here in the diving industry, you get to know them, and I couldn't quite get over, there's Jayne, she was with Peter Easton and da-di-da, she was at Frog Dive and da-di-da. So I needed to get away, and the tall ships were coming in for the First Fleet reenactment. And I was actually working for Peter Fields at the time. Peter Fields...
at Scuba Pro.
Yeah, Peter Fields was extremely kind to me. And when I left Frog Dive, it was very difficult, finding a job afterwards, because people still wanted to be associated with Frog Dive, and if they employed me, well, maybe there'd be trouble. But Peter, no, you come and work for me. And Peter had lost his driving license, so I'd been employed to drive him round. So, and helping with the Scuba Pro at the same time. And the tall ships came in, and I met some people from there, and they were going off around the Barrier Reef, and they needed scuba diving gear. So I sold a whole pile of Scuba Pro gear to the ship. But then they needed a dive master to go with the ship. So that's when sorry, Peter, thank you very much. And it was time to move on, and I went off sailing.
How long
So
did you spend doing
that for 18 months, and
Really?
met the love of my life, and still with him 33 years later.
And where did you travel on the tall ships?
We went, most of my time was spent from Sydney up to Thursday Island, and then back down and across to New Zealand. So sailing all around New Zealand, around Sydney, Thursday Island, the Barrier Reef. They needed a dive master for the Barrier Reef. So that's when I went with them.
Wow. That would have been quite an experience.
It was. We had, on one leg, you took on paying volunteers, basically. And we had one of the Hardy people from Hardy Wines and Ports, Jim Hardy.
Yeah.
And he brought out a tall ship port. And he was on, I forgot what leg he was on, but he was on one of the legs of the ship. And you all mucked in and did everything. So when I wasn't dive mastering, I was in the galley, and the 12 to 4 night, midnight till 4, you made bread for the next day. So you'd have to get these guys in to come and help you make bread. So you've got Jim Hardy that's been making all these wonderful ports, or in the galley making bread with you. And we had 2 ladies that got on, and one was, when you see 2 ladies arrive in stiletto heels and wheelie bags on a tall ship, you think you've got trouble. When it came for them to make bread, the diamond rings were in the dough. It was interesting experiences. We dived the Quetta, and we did lots of diving along the reef.
And the Quetta, that's one of the wrecks.
Yes, it's up off no, where's the Quetta? It's near Quetta Rock, but it's quite a long way up the coast. She hit a rock, and on Thursday Island there's a church that's got stained glass windows with the story of the Quetta. And there was a little, I think she was quite a young baby anyway, about 18 months, I think, was survived, and they called her Quetta. So, yeah, so that was my, I got off in New Zealand, and by then, you know, I'd had enough of, I tore my cruciate ligament on the ships, trying to limbo dance. My nickname was Tequila Sheila. And you know, you're invincible when you've drunk tequila and trying to limbo dance. So
what, because later you went into the travel industry as well.
I did. I'd done a travel agent's course, and when I was at Frog Dive, I did that because we used to like our social club and keep our social club going. And I think Frog Dive still do have a really big social club. And when I came back from sailing, I actually worked at Dive 2000 for a while. And they used to have a huge travel section as well. So, you know, over the years, would take people away, lead groups with people. But from Dive 2000, that's when I got into wholesale dive travel with Dive Adventures. And yeah, we had some interesting experiences on Famils when you take Famils away. And you've been on one with me.
Yes, oh yes, that's right. I remember one of those. So whereabouts were whereabouts was your territory? I presume
it was pretty well where the destination of the time was. You know, New Guinea would be popular for 6 months, and then suddenly, Philippines, there's a new operation in Philippines. So you'd go and check out the new destinations, and then you take dive shop owners with you, or, you know, the major person in the dive shop on these mills to check out the destinations, and then hopefully they'd take a group back there later. So we were mostly Pacific, but I did go to the Maldives, Borneo. Indonesia wasn't quite so big in those days. Borneo was quite big because of Sipadan Island when Borneo divers were there, but other parts of Indonesia weren't quite so big. So it was mostly Solomons, New Guinea, Vanuatu, Philippines, Truk Lagoon. It was very easy to get to Truk then. From Sydney, we had the Flying Pub, which was direct to Guam. So you could get on the plane in Sydney and go direct to Guam. And then
sorry, what did you call it? The Flying Pub?
Flying Pub. It was Continental Airlines, and it had a bar up the front. I don't know the name of the aircraft, but once it took off, and it had huge first class seats, and once it took off, you could go and sit by the bar. So you'd wait for it to take off and you'd run up to the bar because of the big seats. So you'd sit in the Flying Pub.
how to take the heartache out of air travel.
Exactly. Oh, Continental was always heartache.
Were you taking photographs sort of all of this time?
Yeah, you'd always bring photographs back with you so that you could promote the destination and show people, and yeah.
And were you being published or any of them?
Well, we used to have our own brochures, so publishing the brochures.
Right.
There wasn't so many magazines about then. I think the first time I was published was Scuba Diver magazine when Yaffa Publications had it. And then, you know, if you did well, the magazine would send you somewhere. So you'd get to go away with the magazine and you'd write something for them. So it...
So you were writing as well?
Yeah, when I did the photography course, it was... the actual teacher I had, it was a sort of remote course, but the actual teacher I had was Simon Townsend, and he did the photojournalism courses that you could book on through the Australian Journalism, Photojournalism School.
Oh, Simon Townsend's Wonderworld.
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was the teacher I had for the course. So you'd have to write your thing and send it to him, and you get critique, and then you get it back, and so yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, and what because you now I think one of your favourite sort of areas is going out with the great white sharks.
Oh, I love it.
And indeed, your photography seems to span from the large creatures. There's one sort of sitting behind you, humpbacks, and you love sort of photographing them. The great white sharks, which we'll come back to, and then the very small stuff that you see all of the time at your favourite dive site.
Well, local diving, you know, we're very lucky in Sydney. At the moment, we can go diving. We're so lucky in the way the situation is at the moment with COVID that we can actually go diving. And we're so lucky that we've got diving on our doorstep. But the small critters is a sort of necessity, really, because sometimes our water isn't that clean. But, you know, Chowder Bay, Clifton Gardens, Chowder Bay, would have to be, I've been diving there since probably 1981. And it would have to be one of the best little dive spots. What other city in the world can you go to the harbour and dive with such a diversity? It's I see photos of people put in magazines, you know, this is Lembay, this is this, this is that. And yes, Lembay is fantastic. It's lovely. And I love going to these places. But I look at what I photographed and oh, we've got that in Chowder Bay. And
I mean, that's the thing, the times that I've been there with you, you see cuttlefish and squid and octopus and seahorses and...
Well, in the warmer water, we had, this year we had a Nape ghost pipefish, we had robust ghost pipefish, we've had batfish down there, we get mantis shrimps down there. And years ago, we even had a carpet anemone down there with curly-tailed shrimp in. So I think the EAC comes down, and for those that don't realise, you know, or if you haven't watched Finding Nemo, the EAC is the East Australian Current, which comes down the coast, and I think it swings into Sydney Harbour, or these fish get flushed into Sydney Harbour from the EAC. So the warmer water fish come in, and it's like a little refuge for them once they come in there. So we're very, very lucky. And of course, where you go, you know, Shelley Beach, Manly, the weedy sea dragons, there's turtles there. Yeah. People get excited overseas when they see a wobbegong shark. Well, how many do we see when we go diving?
Oh, you just trip over them.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, during the season, the Port Jacksons that come in.
Which it's Port Jackson season now. So
yeah. And actually, we're heading off there first thing tomorrow morning. So.
Right. Oh, well, I've got Chowder Bay.
We'll wave. The other area that you really seem to sort of thoroughly enjoy is going out with Rodney Fox, Andrew Fox.
I love it. My first few trips down there were... I didn't actually go with Andrew Fox. I went, well, we nicknamed him Uncle Buck. And I won't say his name because he's probably still around. But I don't think he operates as a charter anymore. But Uncle Buck had this very small boat. And you paid him quite a lot of money to go and see the great whites. But it's a tiny, smelly little boat. And you slept on really skinny bunks. But he got you doing the burley watch all night. So... you took it in turns to put on this smelly, dirty jacket, and you had to slop burley into the water. And, you know, you sort of, yeah, we got the sharks and it was good, but I'm sitting out there one night in the freezing cold, slopping burley into the water, and I look down through into the galley area, and there's Uncle Buck, you know, fast asleep with wind coming out of both ends of himself. And... I thought, I'm paying for this. So, you know, there's got to be a better way to do it. So then I went with Rolfie, who had Calypso Star Charters, which is now the great big day boat, and Andrew. And then Andrew Fox bought Little Princess One, which had a soft place in my heart, actually. The princess that came down to South Australia, and Andrew I'd first got on it in Fiji at Matangi Island, where she was fitted out, and still to the last trip that I had, and when Andrew still had her, all the carvings inside were beautiful timber Fijian carvings.
Right.
And then she went from there across the Solomons, where I went on a trip with her, and doing Solomon Islands. And then a guy that used to run Kangaroo Island and dive brought her down to South Australia.
Who's that?
And
Jim Thistleton?
Sorry?
Jim Thistleton.
Jim Thistleton. She came down to South Australia, bringing 2 Fijian crew, and was diving around Kangaroo Island. And I remember there's one Fijian being in the water, and the whole time he was in the water, he didn't know what he was looking at. And he's shivering the whole time. He just didn't want to be there. And then I think Andrew leased it after Jim Thistleton had it and used it for the great whites. So,
and how do you actually view? You view them in a cage, even on that earlier boat. So they all carry the underwater cage. So.
Yeah, you always had a cage. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Andrew had the special bottom cage. You know, it's lovely being on the surface with sharks, and if you're a non-diver, it's a fantastic experience to see them. You can go in the surface cage, but to me, I call that the Kodak moment, where you're going to get the shark and it's going to be coming up to the cage. But my preference is being at the bottom in about, you can be down as far as 27 meters and you're in their environment. So the cage is sitting at the bottom and the sharks are just cruising around. There's nothing to distract them, like bits of food on the surface or whatever. They're just cruising around the bottom of the ocean, and that's how they should be. It's just beautiful to see. It's just spectacular seeing them like that.
And I've seen a lot of your photographs. They're just stunning.
They are such an amazing animal to see. It's I thought I'd be scared when I first saw one, and you know, I must say I was slightly intimidated going in the cage the first time, thinking, oh, you know, what am I going to do? But it's just something you want to see. And I remember years ago talking about sharks. It's quite a funny story, actually. When we were at Frog Dive, we used to have the contract for running the shark dives in Ocean World. So I was in Ocean World 3 or 4 nights a week, 3 or 4 dives a night, taking divers in there to see the sharks.
This is the one at Manly?
The one that used to be at Manly, when it had the open roof and you jump in over the side. And we ran a guy went in there, Dave, that used to be one of our instructors, for charity. He stayed in there for, I think it was 48 hours. And we got divers to pay to go in there. And the money went to the charity, and Dave would be on the bottom. So we were swapping divers all the time. And one guy that was going in had spent quite a lot of money, donated quite a lot of money, and I was told to look after him and make sure he's okay. And Bob Taylor, who was a partner at Frog Dive, was in the tank, and I was getting people ready and putting them in on the surface. And this guy was very, very apprehensive. So I said to Bob, he's a little bit worried, just look after him, be careful. And you went in over the side and you lowered yourself down a rope. So Bob came and he grabbed his leg to help him down the rope. Well, the guy shit himself, basically. Came shooting up to the surface.
He thought a shark had seized him.
Yeah. His mask was full of water. So I ripped his mask off quickly. But when I ripped his mask off, I pulled all his hair off. He had a toupee on. So I'm holding a mask and a toupee in my hand. And this guy is there not knowing what the hell's going on. So settled him down a bit and patted his toupee back on and got him all together and, you know, told him what was going to happen. And he got back in the tank and he was quite happy, and he was walking around the bottom, and I went round to the viewing windows at the bottom to see if he was okay. And Bob couldn't look at him and I couldn't look at him because I hadn't put the toupee on properly, and every step the toupee was flapping up and down on his head.
Oh.
But, yeah, sharks can give you funny stories, but sorry, I
no.
went off
Just
track there.
back to the harbour and Chowder Bay and Clifton Gardens. You were there. You've worked with the BBC Natural History Unit.
I did. That was last year. They were doing a series. Well, a series, but this was one small part of the series, and it was about females in the ocean and how they pass the buck, you know, the female seahorses that pass the eggs to the males. So we spent 3 weeks down there every day with the most delightful cameraman I've ever worked with. His name was Tom Fitz. And we had the worst conditions you could ever imagine. It was absolutely awful. I mean, visibility was crap. But we were finding the seahorses, and what we had to do, go in early in the morning, hopefully to see the mating pattern, and then hopefully to see a pregnant one, and then finally see them giving birth. But, you know, Tom was amazing, and I was talking to him after, and, you know, not really knowing too much about what Tom had done. I knew he'd worked with BBC and Blue Planet, and I have a love of sloths. And then Tom told me he was a gentleman, I don't know if you remember, in Blue Planet, the sloth that swam across the water to get to the woman on the other side.
Right.
Tom had actually filmed that. And I thought, oh my God, you know, here's this guy in Chowder Bay, filthy dirty water. But I think it goes, well, I don't know what's happening with COVID, but I think it goes to air in October. They're going to let me know when it goes to air.
Oh, that'll be lovely. That's, talking of working with other cameramen like that, you've taken part in a lot of expeditions as well.
Yeah.
To some very sort of remote areas. So I think you've certainly done
one which was nice to be on was with Sanctum, with Andrew White, bless him, when he was still alive, when he was doing the movie Sanctum. We did a recce around Vanuatu to try and find caves that possibly could have worked for the movie, but, you know, it had to be done in the studio in the end.
Right.
But we went to Santo and down to Tanna looking for caves, and it was just fantastic being away with him. It was the first time I met John Garvin, who's worked quite a lot on the movie, well, you know, has done so much since then. And yeah, it was just lovely. And Richard Harris was with us. He was the one that was taking us cave diving. And we did, yes.
Yeah, you were in very, very, very safe hands.
We were in very safe hands.
Yeah.
But it was funny, we went to Custom Cave, which is a dry cave in Vanuatu that you go to, and it's quite a long walk, and you go down, you drive into the bush, and then it's quite a long walk, and you go down these little sort of bamboo ladders to get to the cave, and then you walk through the cave, and then you have to get down the river to come up in another place. And when we got down the river, they said they had rafts for us to get down the river to come out again. And I'm looking around thinking, where are these rafts? And next minute, there's these rubber rings being produced. So here's Andrew White in a helmet and all his cave diving gear and everything else, and a Dora the Explorer rubber ring to float down the river on. So, we were all given these little Dora the Explorer rubber rings. But then when you walk out, it's quite a big steep climb up. And the lovely local, when we got to the top, they got us back, you know, this has been quite a hard day. And I'm getting out of the truck and my bum and my legs are aching. And he said, you surprised me, lady. And I said, why, what's wrong? You're very fat, but you're very fit. Very old, very fat, but very fit.
Right. So after he picked himself up from the deep.
But Harry was there and he said, Jayne, you're lucky, because when they wheel him into the operating theatre, this one doctor, she's fat, 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 fat. So I was lucky I just had one fat.
So where else have you been on? You've been on expedition with Michael.
Oh, we did the Barrier Reef with the Kathleen Seaview survey. We monitored the Barrier Reef.
Of course, yes.
Yes, that was
explain the camera equipment for that.
Oh, that was, how can you explain it? It was like a scooter with a camera on the end. And it was the first time, I think, something like that had been used. So where people before had to put transacts down, this would cover the reef in, there was a big ball on the end of it with the ports, and it would take 3 images every 2 seconds, I think it was. So you imagine as that's going along, how many images you're going to get following the reef. So the coverage that the reef got of what was going on was unbelievable, how much footage they got. The parts I did, we got on in, now where did I did 2 parts of it. We ended up near Rain Island on one of them, and then, well, we went everywhere.
That's in the far north of the Barrier Reef, isn't it?
Far north, yeah. It was interesting though, because you'd see reefs and you'd think they were okay, and they say, you know, the barrier, some people say the Barrier Reef is really damaged and bleached, and some people say it isn't. It's hard, there's so much Barrier Reef. How can you say it is or it isn't? Because some areas are absolutely stunning. They're still absolutely beautiful. Other areas, I remember jumping in on one area and I was just swimming around waiting for the others to get in the water, and it was all very pretty. And I saw like a dark patch, so I swam over to it to have a look around. And as I was swimming to it, it was like swimming to Gotham City. I can't think of how to explain it, because there's this black cloak of slime over everything that was there. It was just hanging in black slime, and occasionally you'd see a little orange speck, which would be a clownfish surviving in all this.
Wow.
And you know, when corals die, they go past the stage of just dying, they go slimy. And when I got back to the water, to the boat, sorry, I absolutely stunk. You know, the smell of that water, and that was just one area in an area of beautiful other corals.
Yeah.
But somebody said to me the other day, I was talking about it, and they said, sometimes you find if there's a wreck that's been buried way underneath, that can cause something to create this reef to go black. And I don't know how true that is. I haven't got anything to prove it, but it was really shocking how it was. Oh, another expedition I went on, I wasn't the first lady to dive the Lermontov. I was the second. The first one passed away sadly on her dive. But this was when the Mikhail Lermontov first sunk in New Zealand. I went as a safety diver for Channel 9, and she sank in the February, and I think we dived it in the July or August. So went off to New Zealand to film what this wreck was like sitting on the bottom now. And it was quite amazing, because it's gone round into Gore Bay. And where he navigated it round into the bay and sunk it, it's lying on its side and it's right in the middle of the bay. And I'd come to Australia by ship, so I had an idea what a passenger ship actually looked like. But this huge hulk, which I was so surprised about, I was going on a wreck, was white with just a layer of slime over it. So it was still like, you know, it was still like a passenger ship. It was not like a wreck in a way. And we had cable supply lights. So we went into so many places. And we went into the amusement room where they had pinball machines. We went into the bar area where we got bottles of Russian vodka. You know, I've still got a few little bits and pieces of it. That was quite fascinating to go on that. So I was the first female to dive on that wreck. So that was a long time ago. And
since then you've dived and see regularly. Valerie Taylor, you've been on expedition with Sylvia Earle as well.
Yeah, well, Valerie, the last time I was on Rodney Fox's boat was with Valerie for Coast Australia.
Right.
And we didn't have a shark. We weren't finding the shark. And it was decided that Valerie would go down in the cage anyway. And we tried to get sharks. And that woman has just got the gift. One great white came along, and it was for Valerie in the cage. It was amazing. So she came up the surface so happy.
You mentioned then Coast. And one of the co-presenters, certainly the New Zealand one, is now Dr. Matt Carter.
Yes. Yes.
And that brings me the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society, because of course Matt was a one of the early scholars.
Third scholar, I think.
Yeah. How did you get involved? In fact, there was one of the questions. Bridget has asked the question how you got involved with the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society.
I was at a dive show. I was working for Michael Howe for Scuba Diving magazine, and we're at DEMA. And I think it was the last day of the show. And you know, DEMA's a long show. It's a hard show. And this young boy came bouncing up to me at the booth, and we're trying to pack up and everything. And he's, oh, I'm coming to Australia, and I believe you're from Australia. And, could you help me out and tell me something about Australia? And luckily, one of the magazines there, I'd done a story on Australia, on Sydney in particular, diving. And I think you were the co-author on it with me. We did it together for...
Oh, yes, Sydney Down Under, yeah.
Yeah, Sydney Down Under. So I said, look, here's a magazine, take this, have a read. And, if you get stuck and you get in a situation where you don't know what you're doing, when you get to Sydney, give me a call and I'll help you out. So off he went with his magazine, and thank God for that. I was nice to him. It was the end of the show. And from DEMA, we went to Antibes. It was the Underwater Film Festival in Antibes, so going on to Antibes.
That's in the south of France,
yeah.
for the geographically challenged.
A week of drinking and meeting people. And opposite my booth was Bernard Eaton's magazine, Diving. Was it Diving, Bernard had? Yes, Diving, wasn't it? And there was 3 people on that booth every afternoon. And we probably were the only ones that didn't speak very good French. And the first 2 afternoons, they were having drinks, and I'm looking at them, and you rude bastards, you're not inviting me for a drink. So the next afternoon, I just said to them, you're very rude, aren't you? You don't invite me for a drink. Anyway, they did. So started chatting with them. And when we were chatting there one afternoon, this person came along and he said, oh, that's the lady. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? And it was the young guy I'd met at DEMA, I'd given the magazine to. And there was Elvin Leach there, who's the European Vice President, and the gone blank. He's not the president of the society. I've gone blank, totally gone blank on his name. Anyway, Elvin was there, and Elvin said, "You know why Richard is going to Australia, don't you? You know why he's traveling that far?" And I said, no. And he said, oh, he's got this scholarship. He was the 2nd European scholar, and he's come in there to have a look and do some work and go around. And I said, oh, okay. So because he was a young kid and he got this scholarship, I said, okay, well, when you get to Australia, I'll come and pick you up at the airport and come and stay with us for your first few nights, and I'll help you out. Anyway, he ended up staying, I think it was 3 weeks, and I took him diving and we did lots of things. So after Richard, he told the next scholar, and the next scholar told the next scholar. So for about 3 years, I think I hosted scholars from Europe. And then Jade Berman was one of the scholars. She said, well, we were wondering by then why we didn't have a scholarship in Australia. And Jade mentioned it, and it has to go through hoops to get Rolex to decide on their next destination where they're going to have the scholarship, and everybody to approve it, and who's going to run it. So about 5 years later, it
Is that how long it took?
Took about 5 years to come to Australia. There's a lot of approvals to be had, and I remember going to New York to be interviewed, and they told me I was going to the board of directors. And I was so nervous about going. I actually did a presentation course before going to make sure I could speak. because I got to I think it was the 65th floor of an office looking straight down Manhattan, this great big window. And what I thought the board of directors was going to be 2 or 3 people, there was 12 people in the room. So I got there and, oh my God. But anyway, we got there and we had our Sydney event, which you were MC for us.
Yeah.
One of the first events, and Jim Corey came over.
Just very briefly, for the benefit of those people that are not sort of familiar, what actually is the scholarship, the OWUSS?
Okay. It's our World Underwater Scholarship Society. It's been running now for 46 years. It's the longest standing scholarship that Rolex has ever supported. It's been in Europe, I think, coming up to 20 years, and we've got our 14th scholar in Australia. And the aim of the scholarship is to basically, the easiest way to say it is to open doors for young people between 21 and 26 that have got an interest in and investing in the oceans. Our saying is that we invest in the future of the oceans. So it's finding young people whose future is going to be looking after the oceans. So the scholarship can open doors for them with the size of data we've got now and people we know, where we can get scholars, which they never get, is, we just shortcut it all for them and put them out in the world. And, as you said, Dr. Matt Carter now, he's probably the Pacific's leading archaeologist, marine archaeologist. We've got Yoli Bossiger, who is one of our scholars. Yoli's now an assistant producer at BBC Natural History Unit, and she's been working on Blue Planet. And it's so lovely to see Yoli up on stage with David Attenborough. There's our little Yoli up on stage with David Attenborough. And we've got 3 doctors now. I've got 7 mer grandchildren.
Well, they've sort of married and had children.
Yeah, so since it started, yeah. So, and for people that are applying, like with Yoli, when she applied, she had a degree in law and a degree in marine biology. And she didn't know which route she wanted to take. She knew to do law, she'd be sitting in an office and with marine biology, whether she wanted to be out in the field or in an office. So we sent her out to places that we thought would benefit her, so she could get a feel of which was the best area that she would fit into. And the scholars are kitted out from head to toe in dive gear. They're given a camera because at the end of their year, they have to do a 15-minute video of their 12 months. And Yoli took to films, not so much the filming, but putting it all together and the concept of filmmaking. And so her law degree, her marine biology degree, sort of took a back step to wanting to be with filming. But what she did need, Yoli worked really hard and she finally got into BBC as a researcher. But because of her law degree and because of her marine biology degree, that's how she got in there, because you need all that to be a researcher. So now she's assistant producer there. So
it's a good stepping stone for people who want a career in sort of essentially in studying the oceans, and diving is the bus that gets them there.
Yeah, it's amazing. The website will give a list of every single scholar that we've had, and it says, what they're doing. So it's well worth having a look into, and anybody between 21 and 26 should apply. And unfortunately, we've had to defer it this year. We've chosen our scholar, but we couldn't send her on the road. Number one, she'd have nowhere to go. And number two, for safety reasons, we just couldn't send her out on the road.
Yeah.
So hopefully, fingers crossed, next year.
In terms of scholars around the world, what are there? There's the European, the
Australian, North American, and Australasian. Right. So there's 3 scholars every year.
Right. And I think all of them, it seems to me that all of them at some stage or another have made a beeline for Australia and come and stay with you and Colin for.
We love having them. It's the kids, we've got our fur babies, but these are the kids that we never had. And they're so enthusiastic, and it's just lovely. People say to me, why did you do the scholarship? And it's a cliche answer really, but it's an honest answer. I have got so much out of diving through my life that I hope I can give something back to younger people coming through. And I strongly believe younger people are the future of our oceans. If they don't look after it, who else is? We really haven't done a very good job of it.
Oh. No, you always impress me with the fact that you take these people into your home and look after them and sort of mother them. I think that's very commendable.
Oh, we love doing it. I just love seeing what they do at the end of it, and it's fantastic. It's and it's lovely. They all keep in touch. We're doing a thing on our Facebook page at the moment, the Australasian one. Where are they now? So it's,
oh yes, of course,
we're doing a scholar a week. So it's telling you, Matt Cortez was 14 years ago, so it's where Matt is now, what he's doing. He's been a busy boy, father of 3.
And now, in photographic terms, you're now involved with the United Nations. Well,
that was Ellen Gilliatt's. She's the most incredible lady, and she got involved with the United Nations. And I think probably, most of my photos I donate to conservation. If any photos are needed for conservation, I'm more than happy to give them. So I think that's what United Nations is all about, looking after the oceans and showing what is going on in the oceans. Yes, they've got to be nice photos, but not necessarily, the pretty little fish smiling away. It's what's going on, what we see down at Chowder Bay sometimes, what goes on in the oceans. It's horrendous what you see sometimes. It's heartbreaking, but it's just putting it out in front of people and showing people that.
So what's involved with the United Nations?
Just sending photos, basically.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, and just being at the forefront of saying what is going on.
Yeah.
It's
because Ellen is remarkably active.
Oh, she's so active. She's an incredible woman. Yeah.
Oh. And you're also, of course, one of the 2 people in Australia, members of the Women Divers Hall of Fame.
There's 3 of us.
3?
Yeah, 3.
Oh, yes, Valerie.
2 Jaynes and a Valerie.
Yeah.
Jane Bowman. Oh, and well, there's Valerie Hogues in Tasmania, but she wasn't in Australia, I don't think, when she was. But it's Jane Bowman, myself, and Valerie.
And what's the the objectives? I spoke sort of very briefly with Jill Hyneth, who of course was very instrumental in.
It's what the Women Divers Hall of Fame is. They're supporting. It's women supporting women in a way, but it's also supporting everybody in the dive industry, because every function that's run to raise money goes off towards giving internships or scholarships to younger people coming through. So in a way, it's not like the scholarship, but it's a smaller part. Up to 20, I think, internships and scholarships were given away last year. So again, it's for mostly younger people that need that boost.
Yeah.
Or say there's so many marine scientists out there that don't even dive. You don't realize, and it's giving them the boost to give them the money to go and learn to dive or go and do something that they really need to do. So what the Women Divers Hall of Fame, it's fantastic being part of it, to be able to give back again.
Yeah.
They're great people.
And as I sort of mentioned, I think, to you earlier, the time flashes past. We've got 5 minutes sort of left.
Oh.
And you and I have spoken before. Some of the people that you've met, dive with, and have known exceedingly well in diving, there's an enormous number. And there's Mike Ball, of course, but there was the wonderful story of Alan Power. And Alan Power was from Vanuatu and
Here's Alan.
mostly associated with the wreck, the President Coolidge. And Jayne, you have a wonderful story, I believe, to tell about Alan.
Last time I was there, bless his heart, Alan wasn't diving then, and his staff, there's a beautiful, beautiful moray there. She's been there for years. Her name's Nessie, and she lives up near the bow in the anchor locker. And Alan thought his staff weren't feeding Nessie because he thought they were scared of Nessie. They throw the food at her and she wouldn't get it. So he said, will you feed Nessie for me? So yes, that's fine, I'll feed Nessie. So he gave me a bag of fish, and he actually bought some fillet steak to feed Nessie as well. So I thought, I'll give her the fish first, and then she'll enjoy the steak a bit more. She won't just, munch it, because she knows when you've got food. She obviously smells it. So food was there, and I'm getting the food out ready to give her, and she's all over me, and give her a fish and give her another fish. And suddenly she does this strange thing, and her head goes back, and she's locked, and her head's going forward, and she's doing all this. And oh my God, I've killed this moray. I seriously thought I choked her, I fed her wrong. I didn't know what I was. So going,
and you couldn't have been game to face Alan afterwards.
Yeah, how am I going to tell Alan? What do I do? Well, I'll just hide her somewhere. Where can I hide her? So no, I'll pretend I didn't see her. And as all these things are going through my mind, suddenly she just pushes her head forward and she spits out all these scales and bones and then comes back to me for a piece of fillet steak. So I seriously thought I'd killed his moray.
And also, Mike Ball, you had a lovely sort of incident with sea snakes.
Yeah. It's so sad because poor old Alan's not with us any longer, and Mike's not diving anymore. But for people that know Mike Ball, know how fussy he is on his boat, Mike and I do a trip together every year. And Mike would even go around the deck sniffing people's wetsuits, who peed here, whose wetsuit is this? And you'd get told off for, and how dare you let the pee drip on my deck? And so we were doing the cod hole first. So Mike said, come on, come here, stay behind, stay behind. And he'd got some prawns from the galley to stick in his pocket because he reckoned the cod would follow us if we had the prawns. So off we went, and then the cod did follow us, and we had a lovely dive. And then he wanted to see sea snakes, and we were going down to, I think it was Twin Bommy or one of the reefs down there, and off we went in the water. And we're swimming around. Next minute I hear this scream, and it's Mike, and he's on the bottom, and there's, I think it was 3 or 4 snakes all over him. The photos in his shop, up on the wall in this shop, and there's snakes all over him. And I'm just looking at him, what the hell is going on here? Why? And he came out of the water, oh, what was going on? What was going on? And he'd been complaining about this smell. And when we took it, he still had prawns in the pocket of his BC from the dive before. So the sea snakes had smelt the prawns. They were covering him. He was
Now, Jayne, thank you so much for coming along and chatting.
Thank you.
It's been an enormous pleasure. And I should say we've got, I'm told that we've got sort of 2 minutes more.
Oh.
Very, very briefly, Jayne and I are 2 of 6 people that share a record for walking underwater that we did 15 years ago.
Oh, look.
There's a whale looking at me.
No. Where is it?
Oh, I see the plaque.
Oh, how do I do that? That. He's blood. There we go.
Oh, there it is, yes.
That's a bit of rope.
Yep, that piece of rope we hung onto and walked backwards and forwards holding that. It's still got my DNA in that rope.
And the num ray that was underneath us.
But Jayne, thank you very much. It's the time really does sort of flash by, and we don't cover anywhere near the sort of things that we'd like to sort of cover. So we'll just have to wait until next year at ADEX or the year after or whenever the next ADEX is. And we sit back after the show and sort of demolish your duty-free gin.
Yes. Cheers. Normally it's a cappuccino and a poached egg. It's a gin and tonic tonight.
Or in my case, rum. So thank you once again, Nora.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, Jayne. I wish I'm in Australia right now where I can just, meet you in person and actually get to know more about your experience diving with these wonderful people that I'm hearing. And of course, we do look forward to having both of you again, hopefully in ADEX physical show, hopefully sometime this year, crossing my fingers, of course. And I don't know, once we get to travel, let's travel around and hopefully
yes.
to catch up and see you in person. So David, we have a session next week, right?
We do, yes, because of the Mumbai online dive show, which will be in 2 weeks' time. We brought forward the next chat, so it's now next week. And this time next week, I'll be talking with oh God, who am I talking with next week? I know who we're talking with. With Steve Lewis. And then there'll be a gap, and then 3 weeks after that, we start with Dr. Richard Harris and then on from there. So, Nora, look forward to seeing you next week. Jayne, once again, thank you very much for being there this evening. And Jayne, I'll catch up with you for breakfast and a dive in the next short while.
Yes, thank you.
Nora, thank you.
Thank you so much. And do share with us that link of that underwater walk you were mentioning about just now. And then hopefully we'll be able to get support from everybody in the ADEX community towards this charity foundation.
Okay.
Oh, that's our topside walk, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a topside walk. We won't be doing that underwater.
Okay, we'll do. I'll see you next week, Stripey, and hope to see you really, really soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And El France, thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Jayne.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.